Hello again, and you are listening to SOAPBOX. For those of you who do not know, we are still in season 4. This is the opening of season 4, and we are still also in election mode in Trinidad and Tobago. I am your host, Bruce, and I am here with Duane Swift, who is chatting with us this morning or today in terms of data and elections. Now, Duane has always had an interest in all things political and socioeconomic. Hailing from Trinidad and Tobago, he has been a software development engineer by profession for the last 2 years. He graduated from Northeastern University with a BSc in computer science and linguistics, having studied there on a full tuition scholarship from the university and a Cape National scholarship. So, of course, in keeping with our theme, young people who are experts, who are doing excellent work in Trinidad and Tobago and across the region. He's here to talk about the Picong Party, right?
Yes.
Which aims to address some of the issues of data and elections. And of course, as he says, you can always ask him anything linguistics related if you have an hour or two to listen. So maybe after we talk about Picong, we'll get into some of those linguistics questions. Now, Duane, what is Picong Party, and how did the idea come about?
Oh boy, yeah. No, this has been years in making. It started in 2010 when I, would be the person on Facebook giving the live updates to everyone, because I'd be looking at all the news channels. And then in 2015, I decided to actually go and look at data and, get the statistics from EBC and from CBTT, and then I realized that it was all really hard to find, and it was disjointed. EBC has a habit of putting data up and down, and so it was just very unreliable and very difficult to navigate. And so since then, that was like the spark for the idea. And in 2019, I pitched it as the idea project or repo. So I have this idea of naming my projects after things in Trinidad. And IDA was just like this centralized database for all data, kind of a collection of electoral data, political data, economic data, and legislative data, both research and for statistical analysis. And Project Hygo, which is a small region in Sangre Grande, was kind of the predecessor to the Picong Party. And then it's just one of the visual manifestations of what this could be.
Yeah. So when you say you were looking for statistics, what were you looking for exactly?
Yeah, so I've always been intrigued in seeing voting patterns and what certain parties would what constituencies would lean towards certain parties, and how would that change over years. And it's interesting to see how generationally you can see shifts in voting patterns. Both that and when politicians will make claims like X person left the treasury empty or Y person, bankrupted XYZ. Most people don't realize that, yes, they're making these claims publicly, but the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago publishes the actual statistics every quarter or every month on their website. It's just not available and it's not easily accessible. And so that's a gap I'm trying to fill.
And so the aim then, as you're explaining it to me, so then the aim perhaps is to gather data and present them presented publicly, yes, perhaps not sustainably but continuously over a period of time, but also in a way that is non-partisan.
Yes, exactly. And neutrality is the core of the Picong Party, and I've always said this cannot work if people don't trust us, and people can only trust us if they think we're neutral. And it's a task sometimes because we all have our internal biases, but the website and the database and the whole structure of the website from the ground up is designed to be non-biased. You have to intentionally try really hard to put bias in, and so
But how are you preventing that bias from creeping in? How are you ensuring the neutrality then of the data that you put out?
Yeah, so I mean, once again, we're sourced directly from the Elections and Boundaries Commission and the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. That's exactly where we get our sources, our statistics from. Anyone who joins our team, I have two other people who have been there with me from the beginning, and and everyone that comes in kind of goes through this process of like, figuring out, like where do you stand? And we have never been, like you can't support any political party. People have their biases. One of the things that we stand core by is that if you have a bias, state it, and we explicitly say, this is coming from
Mm-hmm.
XYZ. I have a lot of people who are,
Mm-hmm.
members of other parties and whatnot that want to contribute to the site, and I recognize that there is a conflict there of like someone who is, knowingly like a PNM person or UNC person contributing. And so I always say like, we have so many young, brilliant minds, and I don't want to be someone that says, okay, you're supporting this party, so no, because that in itself could come off as a
Mm-hmm.
bias. So I specifically
Yeah.
say like, if you have a bias, explicitly state it. Um,
Declare it.
Explicitly declare it, and even more to that end, and this will come later in the Picong Party, we're about to have opinion pieces and subject matter experts like come on and break down some of the things for us onto the website, and we're going to try to get as many perspectives as possible. So it's not going to be like all on one party, all on the other party. It's just going to be um,
Yeah.
this. I want to say if we can't get absolute neutrality, we're going to get everyone's opinion. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the
And
way we have to navigate that.
and something I want to point out as well, when you were talking about sourcing the
Mhm.
data is from straight from the horse's mouth, and not
Yeah,
a reported data, not second hand data to say this was published by X or unknown or otherwise, a
yeah,
source that cannot be verified.
yeah,
We didn't gather this, somewhere in the in the backwaters of the internet, but strong data, data that can be validated,
yes,
data that comes, as I said before, straight from the source.
yeah. And we explicitly say on every page that the data that we have here is gathered from the EBC or the CBTT, or if we do gather it from government newspaper article, we put it below and we say we got it from this newspaper article and this date, retrieved on this date and everything. And we do go further and say, if you believe the data has been misrepresented or information is missing, please contact us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think because and you would know this, that I lecture in political science, and I think students might be tired of me saying cite your source. Where did you get this? You can't just
Absolutely.
say, oh yeah, I got this from some there are sites that pull sources again
Mhm.
from pool information rather from sources that cannot be verified. And I mean, sometimes even our own newspaper outlets and our own journalists or persons who you would hope would be better knowledgeable, pulling information from unverified sources and presenting that
Exactly.
to us as fact. So that cite your source, I don't you went to Northeastern, but it's a UE tradition. Those who went to the UWI, any campus, know that lecturers' favorite line is cite your
The
source. So I
source. Yeah.
I appreciate that in the context of building knowledge, building, as you said, non-partisan, unbiased reporting. I think that is very important. Before we
Absolutely.
get down into the nitty-gritty, and before we get down into the platform, I want to just chat a little bit about your team, because you said you are working with other people to
Yeah.
assist you with that. Are they young people as well? Where did you get them? What
Yeah.
how did you form this team?
So this initially again started with just me alone, and then you know um, I would see other people on Twitter, that I knew personally before, but had similar interests. And so I reached out to the first person I reached out to was Daniel Ringus. He used to be a lecturer at UWI as well, and he just has his penchant for gathering data, and can he can navigate the internet like no other, honestly. Um, and he also has this penchant for like gathering data and kind of analyzing it. And so I reached out to him, and we had been working back and forth together. I'd be trying to get stats from like 2007 Electorate, and he'd be like, "Give me 1 second," pulls it up, gets an archived EBC site, and he's like, "Okay, here you go." Um, and so he's been kind of instrumental in me getting as much data as I have on the website. and verifying some of that data as well. Um, the next person that's on the core team, I would say, is Vindev with it. He might be known as Mr. Sir on Twitter. But he is someone I went to Hillview with. He was in my, he was like a couple of years below me. But very, very similar background. He has his, oh, sorry, I'm going back. Daniel is working in his PhD in electrical engineering. Um, Vindev is working right now in his BSc in mathematics, I think. And so he's more interested in the statistical analysis of the data that comes in. And he has a publication coming up about the influence of a third party and, how they might not make an impact this election, but how they could make an impact with more like better representation and better political structures in Trinidad. Um, and so those three right now are my core team. Everyone else have been good contributors. Yannick Gibson has been absolutely instrumental in helping me go through the website and making sure like things are worded properly and the UX and UI is approaching something that can be extremely usable. And the other person is adjacent, Jessica Ran, who has also been helping me just gather data. But yeah, those are the 5 people right now, and we're definitely looking to expand much more quickly than we thought we would have to. But yeah, no, it's definitely important to have varied perspectives, and right now my team is approaching that, but there are notable gaps, obviously. So we are looking for more people. But yeah, that's my core team.
And how long did it take in terms of developing the platform and in terms of putting it out to the public? How long have you been working at it?
So I started this in end of 2019, I think, November. I'm trying to think because it had a couple of iterations, right? Just like scrapped it and started over. And the how is the catalyst for it going and being developed as quickly as it was when Parliament was dissolved, well, not unexpectedly, but when elections were called
Yeah,
a month.
sooner than expected, sooner than
Yes,
anticipated.
yes, because I was aiming to launch mid August, to give like a month runway for the elections, and then this happened, and then August 10th was the election date. So in total time, I would say it's been in development for like about 8 months, I would say, like proper full-fledged development. And then there was like this huge spurt of development over the last month, where it was just like gathering data, getting the database in order, getting the visuals and the site up, and making sure the UX is there, and yeah.
Yeah, and I want to ask you as well. So we've dealt with the platform itself, and and a bit about your team, and again going back to the need to create it. I want to now get into the not muddy but oftentimes avoided area of the political conversation in
Yeah.
terms of so you've set out to sort of collect data and present it in one platform,
Hmm.
and perhaps in a way that is attractive to people, where people want
Yes.
to see the information. But did that come about, or in your estimation, are people and citizens in general, but also young people, are they interested in the data? Are they interested in the information behind it? And not only that, but this work that you would have had to do in terms of collecting the information, is it because people weren't willing to go out and find it themselves?
Yeah. It's a combination of all of it. I think young people in Trinidad, and this in general, but in Trinidad specifically, um, I think we've reached a point where we're just tired of, and I feel like each generation before us has said this, but we're just tired of the he say, she say, Picong that happens
Mm-hmm.
on the political landscape. And I think we want to make informed decisions, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't have the data readily available. I remember when I put up the economic statistics, and that was just, and it probably was a mark of my privilege of education. But someone went on the website and they were like, I see it, and I see the statistics, and I want to understand them. I don't know what it means. And so I think there's a gap between the information being made publicly available, and I'm not going to uh, attack the EBC or CBTT. they do a good job at making that available. The problem is translating that to words that and expressions that people can understand. Um,
Mm.
and so I think young people are definitely interested in it. And that that that's how this was born. I feel like I missed the second part of your question. Sorry.
No, that was it in terms of whether
Yeah.
or not having to that was the first part in terms of whether or not people are interested, but the second
Mhm.
part in terms of whether or not having to collate it yourself was a feature
Yes.
of people not doing I mean, you might want something, but are you prepared to do the heavy lifting to get that? And is it that
Yeah.
people weren't willing to go and seek the information themselves? Because again,
Yeah.
a number of these sources are publicly available. However, the value that you bring to it is that you are sort of converging it all into one space. So is it
Yeah.
that you know not to use
Yeah.
the term, but a term used in Great Hack, the documentary, where they say, well, we're just lazy. you know
Yeah, I mean,
is it that?
I don't think so, and I say that based on the response I got when I initially pitched
Mm.
this. I had so many people reaching out to me, saying that they're willing to offer their services. I think people just don't know what they don't know. They need a
No.
direction of like, okay, I need the electoral stats from the ABC from this date to this date to compare it to the voting stats and this to get this data. And like, I think people see it all there, but they don't know how to make sense of it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
when you have all of that ahead of you, when you have all of that, like, um,
Overload. Yeah.
overload, like it's kind of like a sensory overload. You're just like, I just don't want to do it. So I don't think it's laziness. I just think it's a way the data is presented, honestly.
And let me ask in terms of something you said before, because and we've heard it and we think, but we've heard it before. Some people have engaged in the conversation, others may not have. Is it simply a situation of frustration with current political environment, because you were saying people are tired of the he say she say and they want
Yeah,
to find information themselves, or can we see it as well in the context of advances in education and educational attainment, where now or even and especially within this generation where more and more citizens have gone on to higher education, more and more citizens are now aware of the things that they know and the things that they don't know, as you were saying.
yes,
And so now that quest for information is that much stronger than perhaps before, when anything could fly. Is it
yeah,
that we are more vigilant now as well?
yeah. It's. I think I have two responses to that. The first is yes, absolutely. We have this. We're a country that funded billions of dollars into education, and this is the result. Uh, this is the result: a citizenry who like wants to know and who is educated. And so there's definitely that need and that desire for this kind of data to be available. The other side, though, and I think this is what we have had challenges addressing, is that there's also part of the population, a significant part of the population that isn't as educated and hasn't gone into higher education. Um, and so I think that's what the Picong Party aims to address, like the citizenry that doesn't seek the data out. That's what we're trying to attack, and we've been going on Facebook, and someone gives a comment that says something that's clearly Picong, and we like
Totally.
reply, yeah, and we
Yeah.
reply and we give like, no, well, actually, this is what it is. And yeah, so I think it's not as straightforward as we're all craving the data, and that is definitely a valid and direct response. People want the data, we present the data, great. Um, but I also think there's a huge part of citizenry that still doesn't look at it that way, and they're just tired from the I'm not seeing any benefits from my government right now. And so what an informed voting decision for them might look like mightn't be the statistics and that we're presenting, and so that's
Right.
something we're trying to address.
Or it might not be based on credible information as well,
Exactly.
because in the previous episode we were talking about a number of things, including but not limited to challenges that a third party might face. And not only that, but how people develop their political consciousness, or when they do develop their political consciousness, how they do so based on information, or based on what they know, or based on whether events and that kind of thing that could or could not be grounded in fact, right?
Exactly.
And how they feel even going into the voting booth, how they feel may not be even based on credible information. And for those of you who follow me, my penchant and my drive against misinformation in the public domain. A number of people take some of the propaganda as truth, and so. And I want to also state or say here, because I think sometimes, and I don't know whether or not it will be the subject of another discussion. I don't know if I have the energy to even address it, but sometimes when we conceptualize government, or government agencies and what they should do and what we want from them, I think sometimes we forget that as citizens we also have a role and a responsibility. So again,
Absolutely.
even in the context of what you're doing now, the responsibility of the EBC, let's say, is to publish data on voter turnout, maybe trends in voting patterns. The responsibility of the central bank is to publish macroeconomic data, that kind of thing. The responsibility of the CSO to publish human and social development statistics, sometimes trade statistics, that kind of thing. Every and I mean, this is in the context of data and reporting. And each agency would do a report, the EBC would do a report after the elections. CSO has their series of publications, the central bank has their series of publications, but there is nothing wrong, and I think this is again why this podcast exists, why the next season on youth action is so important as well. There is a role for civil society to play to address some of those gaps. So
Absolutely.
it might be a gap, but I don't know whether or not it is a lapse. And I mean, we want information in a timely manner. We want information in a manner that is easily understood, and we want information that is usable, right?
Absolutely.
But we also want information that is factual, right?
Yep.
Because let us not also ignore that with the politics of the situation of the country, every 5 years, oh no, CSO data is not correct, the last government did XYZ, oh no, this data is not correct because somebody was hiding something. But that is another issue. And I believe in last season or the season before we addressed the National Statistical Institute, but again, I digress. But there is a role for civil society to play. Some of the things that we keep saying, the government ain't doing this one ain't doing this, it is because it is exactly for us as citizens and young people to see the gaps and fill the gaps, right? So I don't think I commended you in the beginning, but let me commend you for doing that, and not just complaining about something and but really taking a proactive approach to it and doing it yourself.
And I was going to say, I agree with you entirely in that, because my role was just taking the data and displaying it and, kind of making sense of it. Their role was gathering the data, organizing it, all of that. So I do not see it as a negative that there is that gap. And I agree with you entirely. It is entirely on the citizens, to take the data and we are being led to the water, just
right.
Drink.
Yeah, because and I think, which is why I'm saying, would it be nice if they would do it? Yes, it would be lovely, because then we can sit back and enjoy it. But we also know that there are resource constraints, but we also know, again, from other examples, and I mean, when I say other examples, I mean other countries. Again, there are independent organizations, think tanks, other organizations in the private sector, like I said before, civil society, that thrive on this kind of thing and creating information, especially when we know that there is still going to be the challenge to the veracity and the validity of the information that government agencies put forward, so we don't trust the agencies, but we want them to, we have to do something. We have to do something. So for creating, information from data, I think that's an important role that civil society has to play. But speaking of that, because For those of you who've been around the social media, especially in this election, I didn't see it in the last election or the one before that, but I've definitely noticed a number of strategies. So I noticed that a website popped up. I'm not going to call the website. I don't know if I'll put it in the comments, but anyway, a
I think I know
website
it.
popped up. Right. And you exactly, there are tables and graphs floating around the internet. But I think data without analysis is sometimes even more deleterious or even more disastrous or dangerous than no data,
Yeah,
because I think sometimes there is a danger of putting information out, or not even information, because information is processed and delivered in
yeah,
a way that people can understand. But I think there is a danger in putting data out, rather, when there is no context, or when there's no analysis, because then we lose the understanding that we're trying to achieve, and we lose the context of the situation, especially when we're looking at, say, economic data, where we know that a number of macroeconomic indicators are lagging indicators.
yeah.
So again, how are you analyzing that data? Again, what is your frame of reference? Because if we are trying to analyze that data in the context of governments or administrations,
Hmm.
how are you capturing what is the period of review? Because if we say, 2015 to 2020, right, it
Hmm.
suggests that it is one administration, when we've technically had two administrations in that period. For the
Yeah,
majority of 2015, there was one administration. If we say we are analyzing 2010 to 2015, right, or if we say we're analyzing 2010 to 2020, we had three administrations within that
yeah,
period.
absolutely.
So again, how do you drill down? How do you create information and understanding? And I think that is where your platform, perhaps, and again, no offense to the other platform, I don't know if they want to send me a message, tell me, what the thing is. No, I am
Yeah.
subject to correction, but I think that is where your platform, sort of adds value, and makes a distinction, because putting out the graph is great, but if you're not explaining the graph, if you are not explaining what this data means in context, then
Yes.
you are still, I would say, liable for misinformation of sorts.
Absolutely. And that is something
That's
we're, yeah, I was saying that is something we are incredibly cognizant about. And this was something that was brought up with our economic data, actually. And we specifically, at least for now, until we get an actual economist on board, we had, like, you rightly indicated that some indicators are lagging indicators. And so when I put a period, or when there's a period of government, it actually goes into two quarters into the next government's term, the indicator. So it indicates that, like, the government's changed in 2015 May. The stats for the previous government go straight into December,
mm,
and then the other government takes over. And we're again actively looking for an economist to present, like the actual statistics or information behind that.
mm-hmm,
Right now, we just have a description of the indicators and what they might mean.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's something that we are incredibly cognizant about, and I agree with you entirely. Like, putting information out there with no context is a form of misinformation.
Yeah.
But we're also trying to toe the line of not appearing partisan as well, because it's some of the data can kind of translate to that, um, depending on, like, how you express it, or depending on what economic indicators it is, and it's void of context. Like, you know like, I'm just thinking of this right now, but looking at higher spending in the 2010 to 2015 without taking into context the higher
Mm-hmm.
prices and higher revenue is,
Yeah.
it's one form. Similarly with lower spending and,
Yeah.
a recession in 2015 to 2020. It's
Yeah.
so it's trying to lead again. We're trying to do the same thing, but, like, without saying, well, this government had less money, so that's why they spend this way, and this government had more money, that's why they spend this way, which
But
both
I
in some
think, but
cases
I
can be
think,
taken as partisan.
yeah, but I think as well it comes with the territory. In terms of Trinidad and Tobago, from the time you express any five, you could be looking at sea turtles, but from the time, no, but from the time, and I mean, it is in our nature. from the time you say, oh, well, we're just counting the number of sea turtles between 2010 and 2015, then there is an automatic association with political administration. It's
Yes.
something that I don't know if we will ever lose or shrug or
Well,
throw
yeah.
off. But it that is how it is, and not only that, but and like I say, it could be totally unrelated perhaps to government policy. It could be unrelated to anything, but there is a natural supposition that from the time you quote a 5-year period, then you are pointing a finger at that administration. I don't think we'll ever get away from it.
Yeah.
And I think in this context where we make people more data aware or information aware, and not only that, but I think sometimes in our discussion of politics in Trinidad and Tobago, we are not mature enough to understand that if this is what the data is, or this is what the situation is, sweet or sour, right?
Yeah.
Expressing that does not express a political preference. It is quite, I mean, that's in my estimation. I don't know if we'll ever get there, if we'll ever get that mature. But to say that, like I said, there were more sea turtles. Let's say there's a particular government policy toward marine life and maintaining ecosystems, right?
Yeah.
Although that might be a poor example because there are extenuating. Actually, no, that's a good example. Because if we say that there is government policy and Trinidad and Tobago's vision, and now you can't even say vision because that has political connotations, right? We get so caught up in the minutia of things that we're not looking at the big picture. But
Absolutely.
let's say that as a nation, we agree that we are protecting leatherback turtles, right? Again, from the time you say between 2010 and 2015, because we are looking in the context of politics, governance, and government, then we will automatically frame our analysis in 5-year installations. So if we are saying between 2010 and 2015, sea turtle populations were or leatherback turtle population was on the rise, I don't think that expresses a political preference for the administration. It says that it was on the rise.
Yes.
And then when we add the analysis, if we say that it was on the rise because A, certain mechanisms were in place, or B, maybe there was a migration of leatherback turtles, external factors, internal factors. If we are saying between 2015 and 2020, again, guys, this is an example. This is not actual, data or anything that I've researched. But if we are saying we saw a decline in leatherback turtle populations, it is not to say that we have a displeasure with the administration from 2015 to 2020, but it is our duty to analyze. That is also part of being unbiased, analyzing the context within which that happened. Had there been a leatherback turtle disease or that wiped out a number, like those things, and they aren't excuses, they are contexts that or variables that must be borne into consideration. And I think we have to get to that place of political maturity, because if we are going to analyze elections, if we are going to analyze politics, if we are going to analyze administrations performance, then we're going to have to address the fact that parties exist, right?
Yes.
And we're going to have to address the fact that external and internal conditions play a role in how these administrations run by parties,
Absolutely,
how they perform their duties.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think we still have a lot of growing to do,
As a
even in the
country.
context of even in the context of presenting data, because again, on some of those charts, right, from another place, you see the kind of, and which is again the danger in just putting it out there, because one supporter of a party will say something, would watch the same chart and have one conclusion, another would have another conclusion, not even understanding the extenuating contexts between the two, and more than that, if the data doesn't look favorable, then all of a sudden it's an indictment on, we have to, it's a lot. We have to, we have to get to a place where we can speak openly and frankly about politics and political parties,
Yes.
without it descending into a situation that if what you say doesn't look good for this party, then all of a sudden, you're anti that party, or because you are the messenger and you look a certain way, then all of a
Yeah,
sudden you are a spokesperson for this. We have to get out of that
absolutely. We have to get
nonsense,
out of that. Yes.
or else we're not going to get anywhere in terms of our development. And I
Yeah.
know, which is what the soapbox is created for, my rants, but
Yeah.
I apologize. I apologize. Let's turn quickly to perhaps trends in voting, and what you may have seen, um, in terms of, we had a discussion, that may have been in the last episode, where I feel like the tribalism also allows us to not get into some of these details, because we quickly analyze it as this person is Afro-Trinidadian, so that means that they must say, it's a given that they would say something against the UNC, or
Absolutely.
this economist is Indo-Trinidadian, so of course they support the UNC,
Right.
without any deeper dive into what they are actually saying. But what have you seen by way of trends, or some of the data that you've analyzed already, or the data that you have on your site already?
Yeah. It in terms of, I think what there are different angles I can approach this from. Back in March, I when I initially was starting to ramp up work on this website, um, I sent out a poll. I sent out a poll on Twitter, and if you saw it, but I sent out a poll on Twitter and Facebook, and through WhatsApp and whatnot, just kind of asking questions about the way people approach candidates, the way they approach elections, um, and the general trend this year seems to be not a pro-government sentiment, but an anti-opposition sentiment, or anti-current opposition sentiment, I should say, which is similar to what we saw in 2010 as well. We always talk about the COP in 2007 getting 23% of the votes, but getting zero seats. I know we don't think about in 1987, I think, with the 33 with the PNM, where they got 33% of the votes and got 3 seats. And I think the population is very much looking for an alternative, and this is why I think third parties like the PDP, and now in Lab Until, and like these Diego Martin parties and a lot of the Tobago parties are appealing because people want to see a change. Um, I'm not sure if COVID time is a good time for people to execute that. But based on the trends we've been seeing in general, it looks as though um, it might the PNM might still have the same edge that they had before, but I don't think it will be as an easy fight as they think it is. But yeah, I don't. Was that the context of trends you wanted, or more in terms of like just voting patterns?
In terms of, I wanted in terms of voting patterns, but we could get to
Okay.
that after, before we wrap up the first part of this discussion. But in terms of what you're saying, because I want to touch on those third parties, and I also
Hmm.
want to touch on your sort of analysis of the trends that you've seen so far,
Hmm.
because and I don't know if or how many times I've mentioned some of our political thinkers in the region, but there is the there is the hypothesis or the theory that we don't vote in governments in the region, we vote out governments. And what that means is that when we go to the polls, typically we vote based on our dissatisfaction with one with a government or not. So again, if
Yes.
a government were to for want of a better term, toe the line all 5 years or all 10 years or however long their tenure is, then
Yeah.
they will continue to be voted in. And not only that, but perhaps you might see a lower voter turnout because people are relatively satisfied, elections is no big deal. However, if we are expressly dissatisfied with a government, then those feet and fingers go to the
Go.
polls to vote out that government, and you might see
Yes.
a higher turnout in elections when we are dissatisfied,
Yep.
because people are going to register their dissatisfaction. And I mean, it's kind of like to equate it to business, where you might go and you get good service, nobody will write a review, nobody will say anything, but the
Yeah.
moment you get bad
That
service, all of a
service.
sudden people are all over Facebook, so that you don't know, and
Yeah,
again, maybe it's human nature, but so, just to your point,
yeah,
I remember that piece of political analysis, um, and I think the dissatisfaction is what kind of sometimes overcomes voter apathy and some of those things.
absolutely.
But I
Yeah,
wanted to talk in terms of overall electoral turnout, like again, young people or even those trends in electoral turnout, voter turnout.
yeah.
What have we seen? Is it growing over the years? Is it are we seeing more and more young people voting?
So the EBC actually doesn't, and I don't know why, but they actually don't publish stats on age of voters or
Mm,
like any other like metric you can measure a voter by besides their name, and so
mm,
trends like that are hard to find in
mm,
terms of like how many youth voters are there and so on and so forth. Um, in terms of trends for like in electoral turnout, I think it kind of aligns with that piece you saw.
mm.
When people are inspired or
Yes,
dissatisfied
inspired.
on the other end, inspired, they turn out to vote. And we saw that in 2010, which had the highest voter turnout in recent years. I
Mm.
think it was 69%, just below 70% voter turnout. Um, oh, sorry.
No,
Okay.
what was our voter turnout in 2015? Do you know
Um,
offhand?
uh,
Or we should check
it
it. We
was
should
yeah,
check the site.
yeah. I'm gonna check. Offhand, I'm gonna think it's around 65%. But
Mm,
I can check quickly here. Yeah, here we go. In 2015 was 66.86%. And that's compared to 2007, which was 65.95%. So it went up and then it kind of went back down a
you,
bit.
you
And
said
this
2007 was how much?
65.95%. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. And
yeah.
2010, what was the turnout in 2010?
69%. I think 69.686%, sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
and this is interesting as well, given that between 2010 and 2015, the total electorate rose a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It rose by, I think, I have to actually get the number here.
And
But
that of course is because we know that youth populations are growing not just in Trinidad and Tobago and across the
yeah,
Caribbean but across the world.
yeah,
I think at this point in time we have perhaps the highest youth population that the group has seen. But
yeah,
I want to end this conversation here. We'll pick up in the next episode. We'll get into some more of these data discussions, and Duane, for those of you who are watching us, will show us the platform. And for those of you who are listening, you can still follow along as he describes what's on the platform, how you get on the platform, and how you use it. As I said in the last episode, and as I will say in this and the next until election, the most effective way for you to get on your soapbox, those of you in Trinidad and Tobago, this year, this time, is if you get out and you vote.